The Jake Paul and Andrew Tate fight is coming soon, and whether you like them or not, you'll probably be watching it. And there's one thing you can't deny. Over the last couple years, the Paul brothers have been raking in millions of dollars with these boxing matches. Jake Paul, someone who used to just be a cringy kid on Vine, is now destroying UFC stars like Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, and even Anderson Silva. But how in the world is this social media star destroying athletes that have been training martial arts their entire life? Well, that's why today I'm getting to the bottom of the question that's on everyone's mind. Are Jake Paul's fights rigged? And as a bonus at the end of the video, I'll actually tell you who I think will win between Andrew Tate and Jake Paul. $15 million. That's how much Jake Paul has made from his boxing matches so far, just from the pay-per-view and prize money. And that doesn't even include all the sponsorships that he's earned as well. The fact is, the loads of followers and influence that these social media stars have, plus the absolute thrill of boxing, creates the perfect formula to make millions. And on top of the absurd ticket sales and pay-per-views, these events also rake in tons of money from companies that want to have their logo plastered over every single inch of the event, including on Tyron Woodley's butt when he got absolutely humiliated by Jake Paul. So it's clear to me the reason why these fighters are going out of their way to fight a social media influencer like Jake Paul.
Money!
One of the biggest criticisms that you'll hear about Jake Paul's boxing career is that he's cherry-picking his opponents. Oh, he's just fighting MMA fighters who don't know how to box, or he's just fighting old washed-up dudes. So let's take a look at who Jake Paul actually fought. The first fight worth mentioning is his fight in 2020 against Nate Robinson, a former NBA basketball player who's in his late 30s and significantly smaller than Jake Paul, and Jake Paul absolutely knocked him out cold. Next in 2021, Jake Paul fought a former MMA champion, Ben Askren, who's known solely for his wrestling skills, and he got knocked out as well. But here's where things got interesting. Later in 2021, Jake Paul fought Tyron Woodley twice, a former UFC champion. In case you don't know him, Tyron Woodley was the former welterweight champion of the UFC and had devastating knockout power. And to the surprise of millions around the world, Jake Paul knocked him out as well. And again, in 2022, Jake Paul fought Anderson Silva, one of the greatest UFC champions of all time, and beat him as well. See, most of Jake Paul's critics would just take a look at his record and say, see, he's only fighting old people. And while they might be partially right, they're overlooking one extremely important point. All of these fighters are at the end of their career. Whether it's Nate Robinson, Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, or even Anderson Silva, all of these guys were at the end of their career, had nothing to prove, and were definitely willing to take a dive for one last payday. The sad reality is, several of Jake Paul's fights are completely rigged. And before you comment all triggered, hear me out. Anyone that watches boxing or MMA knows that UFC fighters get paid way less than boxers. So let's step into their shoes for a moment. You're an MMA fighter at the end of your career. You made all of the money that you could have possibly made in your sport, maybe a couple $1,000,000 throughout your entire career. But all of a sudden, you have the chance to fight this YouTuber and make more money in that one fight than you have during your entire career. All you have to do is take a couple punches and fall on your face. And who cares if your hype dies, you're done with fighting anyway. That is the exact situation that these fighters are in. And that also perfectly explains why Jake Paul's not fighting fighters that are in their prime, because they're not willing to tarnish their reputation and take a dive for a couple $1,000,000. But here's where some nuance comes into play. Not all of Jake Paul's fights are rigged. You see, he took a page from David Blaine the Magician's playbook. By integrating some legitimate fights into his career, like Nate Robinson and some of the other YouTubers he fought, he's able to feign the idea that his fights are actually legitimate. And this is exactly what David Blaine does with his magic tricks. While some of them are real, like the water spouting trick, some of them are absolutely fake, like the walking on water trick. And this is the perfect way to convince people that all of your fights are real. And if that isn't proof enough for you, I guarantee this will make it obvious. Before he started his illustrious career as a boxer, Jake Paul said from his own mouth that most of boxing is rigged.
You know, I've been in this sport for a year now, and like I probably shouldn't be saying this, but all of this shit's fucking rigged. In a short amount of time I've been here, I've heard multiple stories about people paying stuff off.
But the fact is, once he realized how much money could be made from these fake fights, he decided to join the dark side. Not to mention, there are multiple sequences during his fights where his opponents are clearly pulling punches and even missing on purpose. Oh, but the knockouts look so real. To those of you saying this, here's proof that the Paul brothers have been practicing these fake knockouts for years. This is a video from 2 years ago of Logan Paul faking a knockout in a sparring session video with Paulo Costa, a UFC fighter, for his YouTube channel. You honestly just can't deny that the Paul brothers are great at faking knockouts. Now's the moment that you've all been waiting for, my prediction for the Andrew Tate vs Jake Paul boxing match. Whether you love him or hate him, the fact is Andrew Tate is approaching the tail end of his career as an influencer. And unless he gets unbanned, his bans from TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube were a crushing blow to his marketing funnel that created most of the cash flow he had from his business, Hustlers University. Now, while he's certainly rich enough to relax and sail off into the sunset, you can't deny that his lavish lifestyle definitely needs a significant amount of cash flow to fund. And now that he doesn't have that ungodly large following since his supposed cancellation, he honestly has less leverage in this deal. Not to mention, he has a bad eye and is significantly older than he was during his prime kickboxing years. And the fact is, Tate wants this fight way more than Jake Paul does, because it's extremely important for helping him retain his relevance in the online world. And as you should know, the winner of any deal is the one who cares less. And because of this, Jake Paul will be able to dictate the rules and outcome of this fight. Obviously, Andrew Tate has the image of perfection and masculinity that he has to uphold, of course, and that's why I don't see him agreeing to getting knocked out cold on live television. And that's why my final prediction for this fight, if it is to take place, is Jake Paul by judge's decision.